Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. Sabhege namaskara. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. बात करनी मुझे मुश्किल कभी ऐसी तो ना थी. बात करनी मुझे मुश्किल कभी ऐसी तो ना थी जैसी अब है तेरी महफिल पहले ऐसी तो ना थी. बात करनी मुझे मुश्किल कभी ऐसी तो ना थी जैसी अब है तेरी महफिल कभी ऐसी तो ना थी. ले गया छीन के कौन आज तेरा सब्र करार बेकरारी तुझे दिल पहले ऐसी तो ना थी. Well, ladies and gentlemen, nothing greater has been achieved in the history of mankind without enthusiasm. But this enthusiasm needs to be tempered with a wisdom amalgamated with the peace, happiness, harmony, and love. Not to go much into the details of the book that has been released now, which speaks about volumes of the contributions made by the Muslim community during the whole period of running into centuries. But my greatest complaint to my Muslim community brothers and sisters is, after having ruled this country for over 1,000 years, we have not presented the Islam in a way it should have been presented. If you would have presented the Islam in a way it should have been presented as it has been directed and guided by the Islamic doctrine, we wouldn't have felt it so much of the turbulence in our society. It would have been a wonderful. Now it is a great responsibility that we will have to bring it to our non-Muslims, Hindu brothers and sisters, the real picture of Islam. And in this context, I will not go much into the history because the authority and the history will be there. I'll be speaking about only the post-independent period. And in this context, ideas are dynamic. If ideas stagnates, the progress of the country comes to a grinding halt. I have chosen the latter part of the independence for a simple reason. I am a scientist. I look forward. When I look forward, only my job is to evaluate the past, assess the present, and set a trend for the future so that our country can become a superpower and the citizens of the country can live with the peace and harmony. And how this could be done, I would like to evaluate. And in this context, if I want to make you understand the problems which are being faced by India in the post-independent era and up till now and what problems which are going to be posed to this country and to the citizens of this country in the future, and plausible solutions and suggestions I will be extending to you in this context. I'll be speaking about the three scenarios, three challenges, and try to just wind up my work or my lecture in a way to just carry forward a home message, and that home message should be strong enough so that it should have a lot of turbulence among the Muslims community and the mind so that they can look forward to see the very optimistic and very proactive participant in the development of this country. When we are I have got a message whether is it possible to talk in Urdu or Hindi. Well, Urdu or Hindi is almost the same. Complete Urdu, it may be difficult, but I will manage. I'll do one thing. If I were to be, okay, fine. I will make it a mixture.
Yes, yes.
Well, there are the three important scenarios. One is the international scenario, second is the Asian scenario, and third is an Indian scenario. You will see that in the post-Second World War that we saw the third quarter of the 20th century saw almost apparently a very calm, but lot of undercurrent went in. And you will see this undercurrent of the third quarter of the 20th century brought lot of sparks and spikes in terms of the new ideas. As I told you a short while ago, ideas are dynamic. If ideas stagnate, the progress of the country comes to a grinding halt. Hardly anything, whatever you are talking of, any field for that matter, be in the field of management, field of sociology, science, whatever it may be, new ideas came in, and that resulted one of the greatest important, which also was reflected in the last almost 2 decades of Indian politics, and the concept of LPG, liberalization, privatization, and globalization. But in this context, I would like to mention Samuel Huntington's paper, who wrote in 1993, Clash of the Civilization and Making of the New World Order, that was in response to a very famous sociologist, Japanese by origin and American citizen, Francis Yokohama, who wrote End of the World and the Last Man. In this context, you will see that 1993, what he have presented the paper, there were many schools of thought which developed in the different parts of the world, and the simple gist of that, what is happened in that particular, and in 1996, there's the whole that paper became, he presented a thesis, and that was published in the form of a book and one of the bestsellers. In this, you will see that if you take the whole world map, place it on a table in a parallelogram, you will see there is 4 important civilizations that have played a very important role. And they are going to play a very important role in the future. The first is the Western civilization. The Western civilization is not a new one. It has already, I think so, for the last 400 to 500 years, they have been ruling this world. And they continue to rule for some more time. But you will see in parallel, you will see the other part of the parallelogram, you will see the rise of the Chinese civilization or the Confucius civilization, which clearly mentions about the rise of the China as a superpower. No wonder, within 30 years, China has been able to uplift 70 crores of its population from the below poverty line to the above poverty line. And the third one, you will see that Islamic civilization which took place after the oil minister in the early 70s declared the petrol as a weapon. He raised the prices from $1.5, $2 to $18. There were so many threats and everything, and rest is the history. And thereby there was a resurgence of Islamic civilization. And the fourth one is the rise of Indian civilization in the post-independent era. And in this context, if you see, this is the world's scenario that is taking place. And now if you are concentrating what is happening to the Asian, you will see that the Japan, which almost was brought to the ashes in the Second World War after dropping the 2 bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki on 6th and 9th of August, still it has emerged as a superpower, but to a greater extent, the challenge for India is not Japan, but the China, which I have been telling in the same platform. I think so I have told not less than about 4 or 5 times, or maybe half a dozen times, almost about 15 years ago. And now it has become true. Now, if you want to take up the Asian civilization and you come to the Indian scenario, in 1947, when India was partitioned to Pakistan and remaining as India, the population was about 33 crores, and rather I would say the 30 crores is starving, stricken subjects. I mean to say the poverty was done, hardly there was 0.5% of the rich people. And this you can estimate how poor the Indian, the Oaten account, which was presented in November because there was no full budget because we got the independence on 15th of August, was merely 171 crores with a fiscal deficit of 24 crores, out of which almost half of it went to the defense. So that means to say for each and every person, there was hardly 3 or 4 rupees per year per person. From that, we have developed to that extent that during the time of Manmohan Singh as a Prime Minister, Pranab Mukherjee, the former president of the country, was the finance minister. He was the first one to present a budget of 1 million crore. When I'm talking of 1 million crore, and now we are just presenting more than 1.45 million crore, that means to say it is 2/3 of the American budget. And when you are talking of the 2/3 of the American budget, is one of the greatest in terms of the volume. It is the third largest in the country, but in the economic power, it comes in the fifth to that. All this is happening at one place. But please remember, despite the fact that we have raised from almost ashes to an extent that we are able to present 1.4 million crores of budget, still you see that 1/3 of the population still live below the poverty line. When you are still talking of the below the poverty line, I am talking of those people who do not have the two meals a day, let apart the access to the higher education or the primary school, including the no primary schools and no even health and hygiene to everyone. So that means to say, if you want to take a linear economics of the whole thing, 70 years we have taken to bring 2/3 of the population above the poverty line. And if you are just talking of 1/3 of the population to be again brought into this one, will take another 35 years, and India cannot wait. And this is scenario. Now you will see that what is happening is there has been a shift in that's why I said ideas are dynamic. If ideas are stagnant, the growth and the development of the country comes to a grinding halt. In this context, what I am going to tell you is, we have a shift in the paradigm from the agriculture-driven economy to the industrial-driven economy to the technological-driven economy, and now we have stepped in 21st century, wherein we have the knowledge-driven economy. In this context is the knowledge-driven economy, but if you are talking the knowledge-driven economy, knowledge is used as a tool, knowledge used as an asset, and knowledge used as a promoter. And in this context, if you are thinking that we have stepped in and everyone should be a knowledge worker, and everyone you have a knowledge society, and you will have knowledge-driven economy, so there is three challenges which are coming in. The three challenges that we face for the country and for the Muslims community in particular are the knowledge, globalization, and the change. I will just talk about the globalization in a simple terms, and rather to just then go a little more in detail about the knowledge and the other aspect, particularly the concept of change or the dynamics of change or idea of change, then you will see that there is a very important aspect that we'll have to talk about. Globalization is nothing but the melting of the borders. When you are talking of the melting of the borders, you will see the competition will be very high. And when you are talking of the competition is very high, what is the one which can just sustain you to win the race will be only knowledge. Now, if you are talking of the knowledge, particularly for the Muslims community, because I want the Muslim community to be in the mainstream, I'll produce you the various data as to what has been enshrined in Quran, what has been enshrined in Hadith, what has been enshrined in Shariat, or we are following it, and why we are facing so much of the problems. If you are taking the whole community as such, when you are talking of the globalization, knowledge, and change, these are not only the concepts which are being introduced in 21st century. If you carefully look at the history or Islamic history in particular, these were the three challenges then in the 14th century. It is these three challenges, then the Muslims community was able to just reach to its zenith. No wonder after the Hijri calendar, you will see within the first 60 years, 2/3 of the then world was under the control of the Muslims community. When you are talking of the 2/3 of the world is under Muslim community, I am talking about only 3 continents were known. One was Asia, second is Africa, and third is Europe. How is it possible that within 60 years they were able to accommodate? It is for a simple reason. You will come back to the basics. Islam was introduced the concept of what you call it as an equality. एक ही सफ में खड़े हो गए महमूद अयाज, ना कोई बंदा रहा ना कोई बंदे नवाज. But you will see carefully, if you look at it, is the only the jurisprudence that was there in that context, or even today, the concept of equity, which was now introduced in the whole world in the last quarter of the 20th century, was introduced, which we call it as an adl. Adl is nothing but an equity. The people who must be knowing what is the concept of equality and what is the concept of the equity. Equity was also introduced during that time. And in this, if I talk of the Quran as a book of guidance, that's why I said, nothing greater has been achieved in the history of mankind without wisdom, without enthusiasm. But this enthusiasm should be backed up with wisdom and amalgamated with love, harmony, peace. That means to say the first thing which Islamic religion, when it was presented to the world, it brought a social order. Social order in giving the maximum respect to the Muslims, women, the concept of the Muslims empowerment came in. The concept of the economic stability to both the gender, and more all, the concept of the knowledge which was introduced then was a spike for the scientist and the common man also to rise above and see that they master the science and technology. If you want to capture the world, you need to master science and technology. Unless you do not do it, you will not have anything. I am now still in the past, as I told Mr. Kuni the last day, when he just casually discusses what should I speak, I said I will evaluate the past, assess the present, and I have come here to see that set a trend for the future. So if you are talking of knowledge, which we call it as an ilm, everyone knows that we have our Quran, which consists of the 114 chapters, 6,666 verses, and you will see, other than the word Allah and His Asma' Husna, which repeats more than 2,800 times, the second largest word of ilm, or the knowledge and its derivatives, is more than 800 times. Unfortunately, we have forgotten this. And furthermore, when we are talking of it, the new concept, the conspiracies which went on for the centuries, to see that Muslims should remain illiterate, it's only because they introduced the concept of what you call is as a dunyai ulum and dini ulum. This is absolutely nonsense. This is not there in Islamic doctrine. This is not there in Quran. This is not there even in Sharia or in Ahadith. Quran speaks about ilm, and the plural of this is ulum, and there is a classification of only two. Then how is it that the word asri ulum and dini ulum or dunyai ulum came in? It was a conspiracy by the Jews, which about 400 to 500 years ago they introduced it, or the concept of dunyai ulum, dini ulum was not there. If you want, you can turn the pages of the history. So that means to say al-ulum al-aqliya, al-ulum al-naqliya are the only two things. When you are talking of al-ulum al-aqliya, al-ulum al-naqliya, when you are talking of al-ulum al-naqliya, it is the one which you will have to imitate. There is no so much of a scope to think or to do research on this, which we call it as a legislative versus. For example, you are forbidden to marry your sister and daughter or mother. You cannot do any more research on that. So when you are talking of the jurisprudence, you are talking of the fiqh, you are talking of the various aspects in the form of legislative verses. Let me tell you, out of 6,666 verses, only 250 legislative verses are there. Then what about the science? More than 750 verses are there in the Quran. That means to say 1/8 of the Quran speaks about the science. 1,400 verses of the Quran speaks about management, which is coming as the most important aspect. Not to go into much detail, the concept of the innovation and entrepreneurship, and the concept of the inventorpreneurship as defined by the very great management company 3M Group, which has done it, clearly mentions about it. When you are talking of 750 verses which speaks of the Quran, you can imagine how much of the motivation and inspiration the Sahaba Ikram took it, and no wonder they produced the best knowledge, best instrument, best science and best technology. It was then backed up with what the moral and ethical values and the concept of the Falahi Riyasat, which was established, or a welfare state established by the Huzur Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam during the Medina period, is the one which made the Muslims to see that the whole world kneeled down before them, and 2/3 of the then world was under the control of Islam. Let me just go a little more. Recently we were talking of the rocking stars which was discovered. It is clearly mentioned in the Quran, As-samai wa tariq wa ma adraka ma tariq wa najmu wa saqib. Not to go in, I'll go further a little more into the details. As now if you are looking at the very important sciences which the various scientists are struggling to understand. I assure all the people who are all graduates and who are in the field, is the genome mapping. All the scientists are struggling to understand the more into the depth of this. And the same challenge that is there in today, at the time when the Quran was to be revealed, the contemporary science, the greatest challenge was embryology, how an embryo is formed. Please remember, about 450 years ago, there were no good analytical instruments or the techniques that were developed to understand at the micro or ultra micro level. Now let's see what was the Hellenistic sciences spoke about it. Everyone knows that the Greek philosophers and their theories were considered to be the best, and their word was the law to the whole world. The Greek philosophy spoke that the embryo is formed by the menstrual blood and the semen acts as only as a catalyst. Now turn to the pages of the Quran. Turn to the pages of the Quran and you will see that first 5 verses which was revealed to Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam in Ghar-e Hira. It speaks about Iqra bi ismi rabbikal ladzi khalaq, khalaqal insana min alaq. The last word of the second verse, alaq, that you have been created like a leech-like clot. And if you just look into the afterwards, Le Communique has to wait till the 18th, 17th century when the microscope was discovered, when they see the structure of the leech and the configuration of the sperm is the same. And afterwards, you know, in the Surah Yasin and various, the development of embryo is clearly written. No one was seeing that because there was no microscope, no analytical techniques to go. Quran specifies this point. In this context, I have only limited time of another 7 to 8 minutes. And in this context, I will try to just make you to carry on the messages. What is that we'll have to do it? So the whole of the Quran which I talks about, it speaks about the science, means to say that you will have to concentrate on the ulum al-aqliya. Ulum al-aqliya, according to that our own heritage and science and technology history of Islamic sciences, you will see that it will be broadly classified into mathematical and natural sciences. When you are talking of the mathematical sciences, you have astronomy, you have mechanics, you have mathematics, whereas in other natural sciences, you have botany, zoology, chemistry and all. This is a part of Islamic doctrine. We have to consider why all the people in the past, as listed by the comparer who talked about the book that was released, the various, everyone were aware of it, that Quran is a book of guidance till Qiyamah. So naturally you will see the science and technology plays an important role, and the Muslims, the concept is very, very dim. Now I will come back to the last take-home message. For you people will just talk about it. We are just ahead of this. For example, as I told you, if you carefully look at, in the first budget, 85% of the GDP was contributed by the agriculture sector. Now it is reversed. 85% of this is conducted by the science and technology. We have got 20 crore population. And what is the contribution of science and technology by the Muslims in the post-independent era? you will see that if you carefully look at 20 crores population, which amounts to almost about 14 to 15% of the population, our contribution to the GDP is, in case of the formal sector, I'm not talking of an informal sector, is not even 0.5%. And this is a dismal. I was a secretary for All India Muslim Association for Advancement of Science when I established a Karnataka chapter way back in 1990s, and afterwards I became the president of All India Muslim Association for Advancement of Science headquarters in Aligarh. I conducted a survey. And you will see a dismal performance by the Muslims. Then you are talking about Muslims is only hardly there are less than, even the recent data confirms that we have not crossed the 1,000 scientists who are carrying out impact research. This is the example that you will have to take into consideration. Impact research refers to that you are carrying out the knowledge asset, you are just building up the knowledge asset and transforming the knowledge asset to the economic asset via technology. That's what you call it as a need-based science or the research. We are very poor in this. When we are talking about the ilm which has been repeated more than 800 times in the Quran, and we have got a poor reflection and poor presentation to the world, particularly the Muslim India, that we are educationally, socially, economically very backward. Ay tahir lahuti, us rizq se maut achhi, jis rizq se aati hai parwaaz mein kotai. We, the 14% of the population, the 20 crore of the population, should rub the shoulders with this. You must be get inspired with, I am sure, the historian who is going to speak in the second session is a very remarkable historian who will just try to give and hopefully to inspire you the contribution of the Muslims then. Now we should do it because I am a scientist. I'm a contemporary scientist. I want today and tomorrow more important than yesterday. Yesterday is only to take a clue, to get inspiration, to get motivation, and only to assess in the present that you will prepare yourself, and in the future you will take a long jump. And you have to take the leaps. And once if you take the leaps, we are talking of the harmony, peace, and please take it from me. If you are technologically, scientifically, educationally advanced, if you are contributing to the formal sector of our economic for the GDP growth, I am sure that 99% of these type of the communal clashes and everything will fade away. I repeat, the best way to halt the turbulence in the society is not due to any polarization created by money. It is not created by any sections of the society. If you carefully look at it, we have not contributed enough to the development of this country. So it is the need of the hour that every Muslim should take an oath that you will not only get your children and your other people, other community people educated, they should be highly educated, not only highly educated, quality educated, not only quality educated, you should produce scientists and technologists so that they should contribute to the country. This is exactly what I want. And if you are thinking that we are just offering 5 times the prayers and that should be sufficient, please let me know. We have huququllah and huququl ibad. Huququllah, we can get it. Even, for example, I don't offer some prayers. I still go to the God. You forgive me, He will forgive. But where is our character? Wherein we are standing as far as the huququl ibad is concerned? That is exactly the social order which was brought by the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. It was the period of survival and consolidation, and it was the period of consolidation and glorification in Medina, which we call it as a welfare state. Well, ladies and gentlemen, the time is coming up because I have been given 25 minutes and it is almost coming to an end. What my is, I'm sorry that I have been asked in the last minute to speak in the Urdu. I will just speak, but I thought there will be people, and Mangalore, as I know, is one of the very literate and having the good command over the both Kannada, Urdu and English. I thought let me just do it so that the fluency will hopefully try to shake your this one, bring some turbulence in your mind and to see that you carry forward. सितारों से आगे जहां और भी हैं, इश्क के इम्तिहान और भी हैं, तो शाहीन परवाज़ है काम तेरा, तेरे सामने आसमां और भी हैं. Well, ladies and gentlemen, before I conclude, and let me just also just recite one or two couplets of Allama Iqbal. सदियां गुजर गई तेरे सजदों को क्या हुआ, सदियां गुजर गई तेरे सजदों को क्या हुआ, दुनिया तेरी बदल दे वो सजदा तलाश कर. Well, ladies and gentlemen, before I conclude, I thank very much the Shanti Prakashans, Mr. Kunni and all his colleagues for being very enthusiastic. I was very well welcomed. I was given the wonderful hospitality. And it was my homecoming because I spent the best time of my life in this place. I have tried to motivate and inspire many of the people in this Bangalore city. All the people have been grateful to them. And I'll be also convey my thanks for at that time giving me an opportunity and also sharing my experience at this time. And in the end, I will just want to conclude a shloka from Bhagavad Gita. I am trying to prepare the Muslim community as the people of the men of action. Because we are docile people. We need a men of action to unravel the challenges, to accept it, whatever the challenges that come to us, and to see that we'll just take the leaps and show to the world we are the best people. We are the one who will just do it huququl ibad and bring a social order, and at the same time we are very advanced in science and technology. And in this context, I have, as I told you, I was looking at the translation of the people in action. I was going through the Bhagavad Gita because comparative religion has been my hobby. And in this context, you will see that in Shloka, in chapter 4 and Shloka 18, the English translation of this Bhagavad Gita goes very well. The man who sees action in inaction. I repeat, the English translation. The man who sees action in inaction in action, he is the man of he is a man of wisdom and true performer of all actions. Let us try to just get whatever is good from the different sources and see that we build up. This is exactly for a simple reason. Let me remind you, that is the one which you will have to take the responsibility for all of this one. Thank you once again, my dear audience, for giving me a drop silence to the whole 25 to 30 minutes. I'm highly grateful to this, and only I'll conclude. Woods are lovely, dark and deep, but I have promised to keep miles to go before I sleep, miles to go before I sleep. Thank you very much.